And I'm gonna do a little bit different the way I did it yesterday. We're gonna look at a few different authors, and we're actually gonna do a direct from Jenna as well. So we're gonna do this one here from Kathrine, who's reacting to Jenna Morassi, but then we'll actually do a couple that she hasn't reacted to yet as well.
Hey guys, it's me, Kathrine, aka your new favorite ginger and freelance editor, and this is Year of the Author, a series where I talk about books and writing and offer you tips and tricks that work for me and might just work for you. If not, well, I tried, I did my part. On today's reacting to Authortube show.
Number 1, my book.
Just so that way I don't cut out her. Actually, I'll go back.
And now it's time for some shameless self-promotion.
Yeah,
if you haven't already heard, Year of the Author has officially launched its editing and critiquing services. I offer copy editing, line editing, and developmental editing, proofreading, and critiques for full manuscripts, chapters, and outlines. For more information, please check out the About section on this channel or email me at yearoftheauthor@gmail.com. Now let's get on with the show.
Number 1, my book fits every genre. It's got a little bit of everything. In other words, I don't know how genres work. A genre is a category of fiction for the plot of your novel. Not your subplots, not your character arcs, not every nook and cranny of the story, the plot. Unless your plot is the most convoluted dumpster fire ever, there is no way it fits into every single genre. Typically, writers say this for one of two reasons. One, they're taking every detail into consideration, including the elements that aren't particularly important to the story at large. Or two, they're trying to upsell their novel to make it sound complex and special. It's not working. You've achieved the opposite. Writers, I know your work is really important to you, as it should be, but there is nothing wrong with giving your novel a concise, plot-specific label. In fact, that's exactly how the industry works, at least if you want to sell any books at all.
Well, hot damn, do I feel called to the carpet on this one. Look, I get it. Genre picking, at least to me, is fairly difficult for one of two reasons. One being my books tend to be a blend of different genres, not all of them collectively, of course, but most of the time, typically 2 to 3 genres, but there still is always that main genre. I also don't think this is the author simply not knowing how genres work or understanding it, because again, some books can fit into different genres. For example, my book Breaking Eden, which you can currently read on Amazon Kindle Vella. The links are in the description box below. The first chapters are free. Have at it. Judge away. So, for example, my book Breaking Eden. It was, when I first started it, an erotic thriller mystery. But since I nixed the beginning part of the story when Eden's found, I'm switching it up to a dark, and I mean very dark, romance and erotica. But there are thriller and horror themes sprinkled throughout the entire book. But the entire story itself doesn't fit nicely into those specific genres, if that makes any sense. You see the predicament here? Picking genres isn't exactly all cut and dry. Unless you go into the book from the very start saying, I'm writing...
I think that when it comes to picking your genre, it really... Obviously, I think that anyone who's writing should have their main genre down. I don't think that people should have a hard time understanding what main genre they're in. It's when you get into subgenres that it starts to get kind of confusing because you have different elements going on. And honestly, since all the genre is really there for, it's not there for you to explain your book. It's literally there to sell your book. So pick the genre that will sell your book the most, or at least will sell to the right audience. If you want to market your book to a particular audience, then pick that genre that it fits in, or a subgenre, I should say. But it shouldn't be. Your genre should be really easy. Your subgenre might be a little difficult, but if you end up with a few different options in hand, go with whichever one will either sell you the most copies of your book or will get to the market that you're really aiming for.
A fantasy novel, or I'm writing a strict romance novel. Another example involving an Authortuber book is Guns and Smoke by Lauren Severe and A. Smith. I have their review on the channel if you want to check it out. Go read their book. I enjoyed it for the most part. But their book can fall under Western, romance, and dystopian. So I personally believe that books can fall under different genres.
See right there, Western, romance, and dystopia. Dystopia is not a solid, like foundational, I should say. It's not a foundational genre. Western probably is, however, usually I feel like Western probably is also going to be more of a subgenre. Your big genre in there that's going to umbrella most of the plot is going to be romance, right? So romance is the plot. Now, are you trying to sell this to people who like Westerns, or are you trying to sell this to people who like dystopias? Because if it's a dystopia, even though it's set in like the Old West, that doesn't matter. The person who comes there for a dystopia is still going to read a dystopian romance. It's just set in the Old West. That's just a different flavor of dystopian romance than what they've ever had before. They don't necessarily need to know that it's a Western or that it has Western themes until they get their hands on it and take a look at the back blurb. At that point, they can make that decision themselves. It's just one of those things where I don't think that like you don't have to have all those different genres attached to it. I also think though too that if you have like two really strong subgenres, how do I put this? It's kind of like if it's too much of a mouthful. Like if you describe your book with using your genre and subgenres, did you just take up too much time? Or were you able to kind of roll it off the tongue really easily? Oh, it's a dystopian Western romance, or it's a Western dystopian romance, right? That does actually kind of flow pretty quick, so it doesn't really sound too encumbersome, really, right? So whoever you're talking to isn't going to be lost, right? That's basically the thing. It's like if they get lost, then you failed, right? So saying something is like a dystopian Western romance or a Western dystopian romance, I don't think that would be necessarily bad, but the more concise you can be, the better.
But you will still kind of have that main genre and like the supporting genre or genres. But it'll be a good idea to settle maybe on 2 to 3 tops and not the whole damn list.
Yeah.
Because that'll be a clusterfuck of what the fuck. I'll give Jenna the benefit of the doubt here and say she's referring to authors who try to claim all the genres for their book, like the whole kitchen sink type of thing. As for the rest of what Jenna says, I agree with it. There should be the main genre and then a subgenre. For example, The Savior's Champion was both promoted as a dark fantasy romance and a romantic dark fantasy. But it was being promoted like that depending on what sort of video Jenna was doing that week.
Marketing. See? That's all that was. She changed it between a romantic dark fantasy to be like, no, this is really for more like people who are dark fantasy lovers. It's going to have a romance in there versus it's a dark romantic, or it's a dark romance fantasy, or dark fantasy romance or whatever, is more like, no, it's really romance, but it's set in a dark fantasy universe, right? You're playing to 2 different audiences. There's going to be some overlap, obviously, but you're playing to 2 different audiences. So that's why your genres are really just there to market your book. Your book could have tons of subgenres, but which ones are going to get most people to pick it up and actually look at it?
Personally think it was overhyped on the dark fantasy bit and very toned down on the romance when it should have been the opposite. As a reader, I felt TSC was more of a romance than some dark fantasy bloodbath that it was pitched like. But this advice is coming from an extreme horror reader and lover, so my level of bloodbath and bloodshed and mayhem may be completely different than what Jenna wanted or what Jenna's level of blood and gore is. and that's fine. I didn't care for it all that much and felt like she was holding back for the entire book. But let's move on to number 2.
Number 2, my book is for everyone. I mean, literally everybody will love it. In other words, I'm an alien from outer space who is unfamiliar with the concept of free will. It's great to be confident in your writing. Writers should feel immense pride in their work. But claiming every single person will love your writing reveals 2 huge problems. First of all, it shows you failed to grasp the reality of the industry. Art is subjective. Even the best, most widely acclaimed pieces of fiction are hated by tons of people. It is literally impossible to appeal to everyone because we all have different tastes. Hell, plenty of people don't like books, period. Second, it shows you fail to hone in on your target audience, which is not only bad news for your writing, but terrible news for your marketing. How are you supposed to sell your book if you have no idea who you're selling it to? I know you want to widen your readership and give people a great impression of your book, but this is not the way to do it. Instead, focus on appealing to your actual target audience and watch the dollars roll in.
Pausing the clip just to say this. Just because an author says my writing will appeal to anyone and everyone doesn't necessarily mean that everyone will like it. Reading is subjective after all, and some people won't love your work, let alone like it, and others will just downright fucking hate it. And that's okay. Let's keep this moving. For the most part, I'm surprised at how much I agree with Jenna on this particular point. I think this way of thinking happens more with newer writers than with, more seasoned ones. I mean, most writers, when they start out, all think, everyone's going to love my book. It's a fucking masterpiece, because they're living on cloud 9. They think, I'm going to get a 6-figure publishing contract, and it'll be opted for a movie or a TV deal, when chances are, none of that shit will ever happen for you. You are probably not that unicorn. And that's okay, because those opportunities come very far and in between. Newer authors should have all the dreams and goals they want. I'm not here to piss on it. But don't set yourself up for unnecessary letdowns and or drama and hurt feelings. Basically, the chances of you being the almighty unicorn in the publishing industry or the publishing world is slim to none. It's a reality check everyone has to deal with. Now, I'm not saying you can't hope for the best. By all means, have all the dreams and wishes you want. Just rein it in and be realistic about your writing future. Consider the unicorn publishing contract as a lottery winner. One person out of...
Even your target audience, there's going to be people in there who don't like it. You're gonna run into people who don't like your book. So don't set yourself up to think that everyone's gonna love it.
How many?
Because if you think that everyone's gonna love it, that first time that you get like a negative review is gonna just probably destroy you.
Authors are trying to get that goal. Will it be you? It's a lottery. Let's move to the next point.
Number 3, my book isn't a normal book. It's dark and edgy. In other words, I don't read. Look, there is nothing wrong with writing dark fiction. Hell, I am a dark fantasy writer. Clearly, I am a fan. But when you say that your work is edgy because it's dark, that's when you reveal your lack of reading experience. I don't know if you're familiar, but a lot of fiction features violence, murder, torture, demons, self-harm, and tons of other very, very dark elements. It's not unique. In fact, it's extremely common. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with writing elements that have been done before. Darkness is common in fiction because people enjoy it. You just can't use edginess as some pretentious measure to separate yourself from other writers, because it doesn't separate you from other writers. It's not edgy to write dark fiction. We're all dismembering our characters too. It ain't that deep.
Pausing here to say this. Jenna, you write dark fiction, but your stories aren't dark. Like at all. You overhype the fuck out of TSC and led with things like it's a death battle and a bloodbath. And I was sold hook, line, and sinker. I'm not gonna lie. This is the only reason why I wanted to read The Savior's Champion, was because I'm trash for Fight to the Death books. And I was sold a bloodbath and was given preschool level mayhem.
Ooh.
When I read it,
Damn.
It felt like I was reading a very tame YA romance novel with a little bit of action thrown into the mix. There wasn't much blood or gore, at least to my standards of quote-unquote bloodbath, and it isn't all that dark. Like, she could have went so much deeper with everything in that book, but instead it was like surface, shallow, everything. I'll go as far as saying TSC felt more like a romance novel that centered around a rated PG, maybe PG-13 tournament of death. Because if you took out all the fucks, the cunts, the cocks, all of the bad words, you have a very tame YA novel. Just because you add cussing into your novel does not mean it makes it adult. Let's just say that. For example, characters are dying off the page, so we don't get to experience that. There are wounds that aren't all that detailed, and no one is really drastically hurt, mainly because magic is a cure-all for everything, which that in itself was just a total letdown. The only death that really got to me was the Human Torch situation, but everything else could have been described better to really gross the reader out and show how gnarly this tournament is and how cutthroat the competitors are. And claiming you write dark shit doesn't make you weird. As a horror writer myself, my goal is to write the most sick and twisted books imaginable. Because that's what I like to read. I like being truly disgusted and grossed out, so why would I not write that? How does saying that equates to someone not reading? Look at my channel. I have a series dedicated to fucked up books and extreme horror. So, are you really going to sit there and claim that since I talk openly about, how dark Breaking Eden is and will be, which I understand Jenna is not talking directly to me here, but let's just roll with it. But how does that mean,
I'll let her go. I'll let her finish that.
On any level, that I do not read? I have no lack of reading experience. I read a lot. But I question your experience.
Well, I don't think that she's saying, like, you don't if you write a dark romance, or if you write a dark novel, or if you say that you write dark, doesn't mean that you are dark, or doesn't mean that you don't read. I think what she's saying is, like, if you say that you're not like anyone else, like you're different because you write dark, that's when it's like, okay, you just expose yourself, because there's so much dark stuff out there that obviously if you read, you wouldn't make that kind of statement, which Kathrine doesn't make that kind of statement. Kathrine's never been like, oh, my stuff's so different because it's dark and edgy. So Kathrine's not at fault for this. So this would not be a statement that Jenna's making towards Kathrine.
Because you rarely talk about any books but your own.
Ooh.
In fact, I double down and question your lack of reading experience if you think The Savior's Champion is truly dark fiction. Consider reading some extreme horror to understand what a true bloodbath is and see what dark fiction has to offer. Because without beating a dead horse here, TSC isn't even near dark fiction in my reader and writer opinion. It's tame and very watered down. I think what Jenna gets wrong on this point is the level of darkness. Now, I've met a lot of horror writers that claim, quote-unquote, I write the most grotesque books around, which totally grabs my interest to read their book. Then I'm ultimately let down and left unsatisfied because their claims don't live up to the level of dark and twisted they think it is. I think one of the best examples here is 120 Days of Sodom by the Marquis de Sade. I'd classify that as extremely fucking dark and entirely fucked up. But a lot of the books coming out now are overhyping the fuck out of their dark content, but they fail to deliver 100%. The goods, in my reader opinion. I know people have different levels of what they consider graphic gore and violence, but if you're telling me that this book's going to give me nightmares, that it's the most twisted and disgusting thing, you better deliver some fucked up 120 Days of Sodom type of shit. For example, I'll bring up Breaking Eden again. There is a section in the book where she's sent to Master Humphrey's mansion with the promise of breaking her will and finally taming her. Well, Harold Humphreys, guess what? Is obsessed with the Marquis de Sade. So much so that he's dedicated his entire life's work to make the 120 Days of Sodom a reality. That being said, when Eden arrives at...
So, the 120 Days of Sodom, I mean, I understood her when she was saying it, that was a book. So this book exists in this world that she's created then?
his house, she enters her 7 days of hell. There is all kinds of abuse, mental, physical, emotional, sexual, all of it. There is all kinds of torture, there is cannibalism, and there is a lot of psychological manipulation and torture. The reader is also introduced to something I named the GIMP. And the
Okay, I was going to pause it, but I got to know what the GIMP is.
GIMP is a woman who had her legs amputated at the knees, her arms amputated at the elbows. She's also had her tongue cut out, her eardrums ruptured, her eyes taken out, and is in an adult diaper because her genitals have become just one massive giant hole at this point. Now, to me, that is fucking gross and dark and disturbing.
Yeah.
Now, since
Fair.
Harold's mission is to
That's
make
fair.
120 Days of Sodom a reality, he has to do some pretty fucked up shit. And then some to hold up to that standard of depravity. And using myself as an example here, me openly talking about how dark and disturbing my book will be doesn't out me for not being well read. Because I've read
I was going to say before I paused it, before she went into the GIMP thing, Jesus, was that basically, she was basically saying, there's psychological trauma going on. I think that one is one of the hardest ones to really back up, to really do, and show it. That's the thing. It's like, yeah, of techniques to inflict psychological trauma, but it is difficult to really show that in a book, to show like the success of the act, right? So a lot of times when I hear people say like there's psychological trauma, it really comes down to more like physical trauma, with like a psychological sprinkling on top, and it's not really that much psychological stuff going on. So I think that one's one of the hardest ones to really fulfill that promise.
plenty of books.
Hope she does it.
And have reviewed plenty of books in my life. If Jenna seriously believes what she's saying is true, that's fucking sad and says so much more about her character than it does anyone else's. Because if you really watch her videos, does she talk about any other books but her own? No. But there may be that rare occasion that she does. As a reader reading TSC
I haven't
for the
watched
first...
Jenna in a number of years, so I can't say for sure whether she does or not now, but I like her saying this does make me kind of think back to the videos I've watched of Jenna in the past, and that is kind of true. I don't think Jenna really talks about much more than her own book, which, that's not wrong, but it is one of those things where I would like to hear people's books that they read in the past, in the sense of like, just to kind of get like their inspiration. That's really what it comes down to. It's, what made you kind of think of this? What authors do you really draw inspiration from? That kind of thing. So yeah, I could not tell you, other than I think she's mentioned Harry Potter, which almost every single kid that was my age back when it came out read. So it's like, that's nothing special to know. But I think besides that, I don't think I can name a single book that I know she's read.
First time, I was just like, she thinks this is dark? Like, what books is Jenna reading? Come on, there is barely any description of gore or wounds or suffering. If the character doesn't die soon after being hurt, then once they get to the little camping area, the magic cures them all right up, and they're good as new. So you
Yeah, when it comes to healing, magic systems in general, I think that there does need to be some stakes involved, but I also think that having healing does allow for like more serious things to occur. It sounds like in the Savior's Champion, they had to make it to a location in order to get healed, though, and that is different. A lot of times in fantasy, it's more like you can get healed during a fight, even, right? As long as the healer's able to focus on you or whatever. But yeah, it does sound not just by the way that Kathrine describes it, by the way I've heard other reviewers describe it. It does sound like the stakes were kind of lowered since there was healing involved, or like the way the healing was done. I think stakes can still be high, even with healing involved, as long as you kind of balance it out, right? Like whatever it is that they're dealing with, the healing either won't be able to go as long as the damage can go. So like, we're going to be fighting for 30 minutes, but the healing can only last 20. So therefore the last 10 minutes you're on your own kind of thing. Or it's like at any moment you could just get killed immediately, and I can't fix that. I can't fix dead. So therefore like you need to survive whatever the massive attack is, and then I can heal you. And also, like worse wounds take more time to heal. Anything like any kind of drawback to where it's not just like, presto, you're healed kind of thing. Or like, hey, we can take a time out and heal. I do think that kind of stuff does lower the stakes to a certain degree. But I don't know. It's just one of those things where like any premise sounds good. Like the idea of like, oh yeah, as long as they make it to the fire, the campfire here in Jenna's book, then they're safe, sure, but they got to make it there, right? And so idea wise, it sounds like that might work out, but according to Kathrine and a lot of others who read that thing, it did not do so hot.
using Jenna's logic here. I'm chalking this up to Jenna not being well read in dark fiction or anything remotely close to extreme horror. In fact, does Jenna even read herself, except for the non-fiction books? I know there is talk floating around the community about her not even reading fiction books and sticking more to nonfiction, which, if that's the case, then do you. Continue to read whatever the hell you want. But I'm starting to wonder this myself because her definition of dark fiction and mine are not the same, like at all, on any level. And it's due to me reading a lot of extreme horror, and I mean a lot.
Yeah, that's one thing too, is like, and I think Kathrine does temper herself in this, where it's like if you read a lot of horror, you can't then take away someone else's, banner of like, hey, this is dark fantasy. And then it's like, well, no, it's not, because I read all this horror stuff and that's way darker than this, so this isn't dark fantasy. I don't think Kathrine's really doing that. I think what she is doing is saying, look, there's dark fantasy, then there's horror, and then there's what you have, and that's over here. You're not in the dark fantasy realm. I can see dark fantasy because I read it, and I also read worse stuff, so you're over here in not dark fantasy. Now, is she right? I don't know, because again, I didn't read this book, but I think that when it comes to dark fantasy, you need to have certain themes, and you need to have it kind of clear that it's not special, right? So like, so basically like sexual assault, if you're going to do that one, then you need to make it clear that like that can happen at any time to anyone under the right circumstances kind of thing, right? It's not like only the villain would do something so despicable as that, right? It's people out in the world will do this too. my first fantasy novel, it stays pretty clean compared to following entries, but I mean it has child sacrifice, right? Like I think that's pretty dark. And it's not just like note, it's not off the page. It's like you were right there, you saw it, you saw the aftermath of it as well. So it's one of those things where depending on how much you go into it too. So like if I had my book and I just only mentioned that it was child sacrifice, like, oh, they found the body, it was, it wasn't good. That would not be as dark as actually taking the reader there and showing them the body, showing them the knife, showing them, the people doing it. So it depends on how you do it, but, referring to things can help make it a little easier. But then if you're doing that, you're not going down that darker path.
To the point where TSC feels like a kindergarten novel. A YA novel just packed full of fucks, cunts, cocks, and that's the reason why it makes it an adult novel. But, so I don't keep repeating myself, let's move on to the next point.
Number 4. The only reason I'm not selling copies is because no one appreciates my artistic genius. In other words, I'm not willing to accept even a remote shed of blame for my personal failings. There are a million rational reasons why books don't sell. The cover is terrible, the blurb is a mess, the title isn't searchable for a variety of reasons.
See, looking at the art that she has back here of this dude, Tobias, that makes me feel like it's not really... It's just the way it's done, but it just makes me feel like it's not dark. Like it doesn't have there's no grittiness to it. I mean, it looks literally like a portrait, which it is, but it just looks like a nice portrait of a character. It doesn't really feel like if I wanted to show off that the story is gritty, I would have him like bleeding.
You didn't market the book. You didn't utilize any promotional tactics. You didn't announce its release whatsoever.
Which I guess she didn't say it was gritty. She just said it was dark fantasy. But usually, in my opinion, dark fantasy is going to have like some gritty realism going on.
And of course, maybe the book is bad. But there isn't a writer alive who isn't selling because they're too much of a genius. That's not a thing that happens. Sure, you may be a creative genius, and maybe your book isn't selling, but that's not why it's not selling. Your book might be a masterpiece, but if you slapped on a shitty cover and did dick all marketing, it's not gonna sell. You can rely on this excuse all you want, but at the end of the day, it's not gonna improve your position. You can either learn from your mistakes and do better, or you can drown in your denial. Up to you.
Pausing the clip to say, holy shit, I cannot agree more with Jenna on this point. The writing community is oversaturated in creative geniuses who need to be knocked off their pedestals so they can come back to the reality and deflate their egos just a little bit. I know this is a harsh...
Like, I'm not super in the writing community, I guess. I don't do Twitter, I don't do Facebook. All I ever do is I watch YouTube, I upload on YouTube sometimes, and TikTok, right? My TikTok really consists of people giving writing advice, people giving marketing advice, and people marketing their book. That's really what my feed consists of. So I don't really see people who are like, anywhere close to this, like, oh man, I'm just so good at this. No one appreciates my beauty of mind. I haven't run into that. I have run into people saying, I got rejected or whatever, but they're usually just like, it's usually supposed to be kind of like a motivational thing, like, I got rejected again, but you know what, guys, I'm not gonna stop trying. I want to keep going. And that's fine. If you get rejected by a publishing house and you want to share that with everybody and then say that I'm going to keep going, then yeah, sure, do that. But yeah, it's just one of those things where I haven't run across this, but I highly imagine that I'm not as deeply ingrained as she is in the writing community.
Truth for some, but you are no Mary Shelley or Shakespeare or even Dr. Seuss. And I say this with the utmost disrespect. If your book blurb is a hot mess and doesn't explain the plot of your book well enough to hook readers, you aren't going to be selling copies. If your cover looks like a hot mess that doesn't fit the genre you're writing in, you aren't going to be selling any copies. As a self-proclaimed cover snob, I get it. I love, and I mean love, artistic covers. I love original covers, but sadly those don't sell copies if they do not fit your genre. I know writers out there who want to pave their own path into the publishing world and do their own thing, which to some degree I kind of respect. But respect doesn't sell books. But professionally made covers that clearly show your book's genre does. It's good to remember that your book is a product and you, the author, are a business. So learn everything you possibly can about marketing your book, hire a decent editor and a cover artist, and make your blurb deliver what it promises. And then hope for the best, because you still have an uphill climb.
Yep.
Also, check your ego at the door and don't set yourself up for major disappointment. What a wonderful pep talk that was.
Yeah.
Let's move to the next clip.
Number 5. My writing's comparable to the Iliad, the Odyssey, and Beowulf. In other words, my ego is as fragile as a pair of testicles. Who says something like this with a straight face? I genuinely want to know. How can you compare your work to some of the most epic pieces throughout history and then think to yourself, yeah, that checks out? I'm not saying your work is bad, though that usually tracks with people who say shit like this. But it's like comparing your painting to the Mona Lisa. It just takes arrogance to a new level. First of all, art is not deemed monumental by the artist themselves. This title is given by the consumers, the audience, and in this case, the readers. If your readers think you've written the next Odyssey, that's great, but that is not a judgment for you to make. Second, the writing style of these epics do not hold up in modern literature. So if you're trying to emulate them, your audience is going to be a whole lot of zero. I've said it before and I'll say it again, confidence is key in this industry, but there is a big difference between self-assurance and self-delusion.
Well, shit, I guess I spoke too soon. I'm totally agreeing once again with Jenna. I personally think this point can tie in with the last one, but let's keep playing the clip so I don't keep repeating myself. I'll just say this. If you think your writing is on the same level of a classic book, you're just setting yourself up for failure, or for readers to critically read your work for the sole purpose of ripping it to shit to bring you back down to earth. And
it is good to have a healthy amount of enthusiasm on your work, because you should think that you're good. Because if you don't think that you're good, then don't waste your time sharing it with anyone else. Like if I made a meal and I burnt it, I'm not going to share that with my wife, right? I mean, it's ruined, so it's not good. It's not good for her to eat it. So why would I share that with her, right? Why would I give her that? So same thing with your art, is like, if you don't think it's good, then there's no reason for you to be giving it out. So obviously a healthy amount of, I think this is really good, I think I did a really good job here. I think people will like this, that kind of enthusiasm I think is fine. But yeah, if you go overboard to the point of where it's like, I think I just wrote like the new American classic, I don't think that's not a good look.
And deflate your overinflated ego. You're just setting yourself up for failure here, guys. I've met a chunk of authors who seriously believe they are a gift to the world of writing. And then when you read their work, they are one or all of a few things. One, they purple prose the fuck out of their narrative to the point of boring the reader to literal death. Two, they talk in circles and are saying a whole lot of nothing important, like here is everything but the point. Or three, use every goddamn trope and cliche under the sun and think their work can pull it off when it doesn't. I mean, if your book opens up with a dream sequence and the character waking up to an ordinary day, do you even know tropes at all? Because a newbie writer could have seen that from like 10 miles away. Or they didn't even know it was the trope or cliche because they don't fucking read themselves. Key word for authors here. Read a book. Any book.
Read a book.
Or all the books. Just start reading. Don't just concentrate on writing all the time.
The thing is with reading, and obviously I'm not saying not to read, but the thing is with reading is that so often you are reading things that are still trash. You know, like so often there are things that are still absolute. I mean, like imagine if you were like, I'm gonna go read Twilight. Yeah, that's probably not gonna help very much. You know, and also too, if you read like the old, like, I'm gonna read Odyssey. I'm gonna read the Odyssey. I'm gonna read Homer. That's also not gonna help you a great amount, right? You have to like take a class on the Odyssey to really understand its value to writing. It's not. It's so yeah. Reading is one of those things where it's like it will help you eventually because you'll see what you like, you'll see what you don't like, but I don't think that reading. It's hard to say because it's one of those subjective things. You know, you could read something and be like, they didn't pull it off, while another reader would read it and be like, oh man, they made that work so good. So it's all subjective.
Time. Read. But don't worry, they'll still act like they are the end-all, be-all to the craft of writing and that they know more than everyone, when they don't. And never once will they ever admit to maybe even possibly doing something wrong in their own writing, because to them, their egos won't allow it. Can we bring back some humility to Authortube and the writing community as a whole?
No.
There isn't anything wrong with openly talking about our fuck-ups in our own books. There is no perfect author out there in existence, and that's perfectly okay. But on to the next point.
Number 6. I don't really read. I'm writing this book because I watch TV, movies, and anime. In other words, my book probably sucks. This is not a dig at these forms of media or anyone who enjoys them. And it's fine if you are inspired by other artistic mediums while writing. I'm personally heavily inspired by music. But if you don't read, this doesn't bode well for your writing. You sorta gotta study the art form in order to create that kind of art. This should be common sense. This doesn't mean you gotta read 100 books a year. Not everyone can do that. I sure in hell can't. But you gotta read something, especially your genre. Make an effort. And at the very least, don't tell people you don't read. It's pretty embarrassing. Writers who don't read usually don't write good books, so you're just telling people to avoid your work at all costs.
Oh Lord, here we go again. And another one bites the dust. I will never understand people who say they want to write, but they never want to read a fucking book. How does that even work, exactly?
Yeah, how does that work?
One of my biggest pieces of writing advice here on this channel is to read. And read, and read some more. Reading is a natural way to learn storytelling, at least to me. It also allows you to see what you like and don't like in books. People can learn so much from just picking up a book and reading it, but let's continue the clip so I don't repeat myself. If fiction isn't your thing, then read writing craft books and learn the ins and outs that way. But like Jenna said, telling people you don't read but you write books because you watch TV is a good way to tell people your book is going to suck, so don't waste your time reading it. Now, I personally haven't met a writer that doesn't read, so I have no personal experience of interacting and or reading a book that was written by someone who doesn't read. To me, it just makes absolutely no fucking sense. But people can do whatever the fuck they want. I can only control myself. Y'all are free to do whatever you want to do. But I'm telling you now, reading other people's books is the best way to learn storytelling. And if you're not reading and you're just watching TV going, I can write a book because I watch TV, you're like shooting yourself in the foot. But it is what it is. As for me, I enjoy reading. To me, that's the best way I learn to be a better writer and an editor. I love to read and dissect books. I like to figure out what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and how I would make it that much better. But on to the next point.
Yeah, I would say that that's where a lot of a lot of like your base level story crafting can come up is when you read a story and then you think of ways to improve that story, right? That's why a lot of authors get like kind of like cut their teeth with fan fiction, is because they're taking the idea and just running with it, right? And you see that a lot with kids, right? They'll watch a movie and then for the next week they'll be pretending to be those characters that they saw in the movies. They're the Ninja Turtles for, you know, months, or they're Batman, or they're Superman, right? Or they're Spider-Man, whatever. When they watch these movies, they turn into those things for a while, and they're basically telling stories in their head as they run around and play. And the same thing happens when you're a writer, or when you're a reader and you're kind of like edging towards writing, is when you are reading a book and you're just like, man, it would be so much better if so and so would go over here and would, you know, do this thing, and that would be so cool, and what would happen if this would happen, that kind of thing, right? That's basically like a lot of the genesis for people's storytelling. So reading really does help out a lot. And as you get deeper into it, you start seeing like behind the scenes kind of way. A lot of times when I'm watching TV, when I'm watching movies or watching, you know, a TV show or whatever, and the camera like focuses in on something and then like zooms back out kind of thing, right? It's like, okay, so that thing's important. They showed me the knife on the table. That's going to come into play at some point. Or, you know, we just went through this entire scene. What was this scene for? Rather than just kind of like being entertained by the scene that happened, I kind of think of like, what is this scene really for? What is its purpose, right? They have an hour of time for this episode. Why did this make it into the episode, and other things that I don't get to see, they didn't make it in? Why was this important, right? So the same thing can happen to a book, where when you're reading and you're going, okay, now why did this make it into the chapter? Now, what made this important enough to take up word count, right? Because now that I know, like, you know, when I was a kid, I didn't think like that, but now that I know that like word count is like, you know, you pay for every word, right? You got to print out every word, so you got to pay for it. So now that I know that like it has to be in there for a reason, editors are going to cut out stuff that don't need to be in there. Why did this make it in? What's the relevance here? What's the importance? How might this come back? What is this foreshadowing, right? You think about those kind of things, and now you're kind of on a different level of like imagine craft, of, you know, what the story is and how it might come about. Because you might think of like 5 different things for, okay, why did she pick up the knife? What are they going to do with that knife, right? You might think about that, 5 different things that could come of it, and then a 6th thing actually does come of it. You were wrong all 5 times, but your ideas weren't bad. They were just not correct. But, you know, you imagine these different outcomes. You imagine how it could have gone. And, you know, that's a part of the writing process, is imagining what could happen, what does happen, and then, you know, choosing, what am I actually going to show the readers? Why is this important enough to actually put on my page? So I definitely agree. Read. I understand where, because I've done this myself, where it's like, I think I went one time, I went like a full, God, I want to say like maybe like a year and a half without reading anything that was published. I still read people's like works in progress. So that's something, but it's not reading a finished manuscript where you can look at it and say like, why did this make it in? You're looking at things when you're reading someone else's work in progress as a critique partner. You're looking for things to be like, okay, now why is this in here? There's no reason. Okay, cut this, right? Like you're telling them to cut things that they don't, you know, at that point. So it's one of those things where reading an unfinished manuscript helps, but it's not quite the same thing. So I went like a year and a half without reading a published book, because of the fact that I was just so busy with work, so busy with writing, so busy with my own editing, so busy with critiquing and editing other people. So I didn't have time to sit down and read in my life at that time. So I can understand people taking a break from reading. Yes, it's good to read. Yes, it's better if you do read. But at the same time, if you don't read, don't kill yourself over it. Just try to fit it in. You know, it's one of those things where you can build a habit around not reading. But if you become mindful of it, you can start building a habit around reading. Carve out 30 minutes in a day. Just take it. Just take 30 minutes. And then you've read some, you know. Even if you don't finish that book for, you know, an entire 6 months or whatever, right? People go through a book like a week sometimes. I'm like, who are you? What are you doing? I've never read a book that fast. I have devoured some books, right? I've never read a book for leisure, I should say, inside of a week. I have read books inside of a week when I'm critiquing them because I want to get that book back to that person as fast as possible and tell them, you know, here's where you can fix things or whatnot. So yeah, it's one of those things where I've never read that fast for leisure. So I don't know who those people are.
Number 7. My writing doesn't cater to the PC police. In other words, I want to write racial slurs and you can't stop me. Listen, regular people don't care about the PC police. And that's for one obvious reason. They're not bigots. But Jenna, the woke crowd is trying to stifle my artistic expression.
Okay.
That's a load of...
At first I thought she was saying, like, if you don't write for the PC police, then you're a racist bigot. But what she's saying is that if you're out there and you're proclaiming that you don't write for the PC police, then you're a racist bigot, which I still think is incorrect, but it's a little less harsh than what I originally thought she was saying.
Bullshit, and you know it. Some of the most popular books in recent history are about child murder, societally enforced rape, and graphic dismemberment of genitals. Nothing about fiction is PC, and most of the time that's the point. Literally no one is repressing your art. What happened is, your art told on you. You released a garbage story, people noticed, and now you're shitting your diaper.
Oh Lord, here we go again. Jenna, I'm gonna need you to just shut the fuck up. There, I said it. Christ, here we go. It's gonna be World War III.
God. Okay, I've seen a few of these types of videos before. I don't know if she's ever told her to shut the fuck up.
Jenna is a part of the PC camp who can't differentiate between fiction and real fucking life. A fictional character in a fictional setting using a realistic slur isn't the same as someone saying it in real life. What a character says in a book doesn't mean that author believes that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's what Jenna's exactly saying. I hope that's not what Jenna's saying. I don't know. Hold on. Let's go back over that. Hold on.
Listen, regular people don't care about the PC police, and that's for one obvious reason. They're not bigots. But Jenna, the woke crowd is trying to stifle my artistic expression. That's a load of bullshit, and you know it. Some of the most popular books in recent history are about child murder, societally enforced rape, and graphic dismemberment of genitals. Nothing about fiction is PC, and most of the time that's the point. Literally no one is repressing your art. What happened is, your art told on you. You released a garbage story, people noticed, and now you're shitting your diaper.
Oh Lord, here we go again. Jenna, I'm gonna...
Okay, so I
need you to just shut the fuck up. There, I said it. Christ, here we go. It's going to be World War III. Jenna is a part of the PC camp who can't differentiate between fiction and real fucking life. A fictional character in a fictional setting using a realistic slur isn't the same as someone saying it in real life. What a character says in a book doesn't mean that author believes that or is that character.
Yeah.
The sooner people start remembering and realizing.
Yeah, okay, so I'm not really sure, because hearing what Jenna said, I do kind of question. I would need more context from Jenna, because I'm wondering what she means by, like, your book told on you, right? Like, is it like you've you made all your black characters bad kind of thing. Like, is that what you're talking about, or is it like you're talking because what Kathrine is talking about is like if a character uses a racial slur in your book, that does not mean that you as the author actually condone people using racial slurs in their books, or excuse me, using racial slurs in real life. So I don't know if that's what Jenna's really saying. I feel like Jenna's more like saying that. Well, but she makes it about, you know, like people saying it's not for the PC police. So I'm a little confused on what Jenna's really saying here. I would need her to clarify this, but I would agree that if you have a character that uses racial slurs, that is not an indication that you condone that behavior, unless that character is like glorified in doing so, right? The character might have like a redeeming arc in the sense of like you watch what was that movie? American History X, I think is what it was called, where the main character was like a Nazi, and then he goes to prison over killing two guys, and then he gets raped in prison, and then he is like, you know, I want to give this up. I don't want to have this hate anymore, right? So, and I think he wants his little brother or his cousin or whatever the other character was. He doesn't want them to get into the whole Nazi movement. So that is where like the character's nasty actions was not glorified, right? He's still technically like the hero of the story because it's his journey out of that mindset, right? And therefore he becomes a good person. That would be kind of where it's okay. Then there are nuances, right? I mean, that's more kind of like someone who's coming out of like, you know, the black versus white. They're going through that morally gray period, and then they come out and then they're a good person. They don't believe in the racism and stuff. I think that there is a story to be told where there's morally great characters who do good things, but they also have nasty views. You don't like that person 100%, but it's like, well, he did really good over here, he did really bad over there. Like, it's kind of like it just depends on what day you're catching him on, or depends on what topic you're talking about. There are some redeeming qualities. There are some really, really horrific qualities. I think that those are characters that you can explore. It's just, if you're an author and you are like really glorifying the use of racial slurs, no matter what race it's against, doesn't matter if it's black or any other, right? That is going to be that might expose yourself. Yeah, that might be exposing yourself. And hopefully that's not what you're doing. But if you just happen to have a character in there who uses a racial slur, and it's meant to kind of like show the hardship of your main protagonist, or it's meant to, build that person up as a piece of trash, right? Like if you use it towards the purpose of your plot, then I think that's okay, because you're not condoning it yourself. You're not saying like we should be calling people these names. That's not what you're doing, right? I mean, like she mentioned, there's like child killing, or I don't know all the ones that she went over, but like sexual assault, child killing, books talk about genocide. It's the author's not condoning those things, right? That's not what the author's saying. So I don't think that the argument really is that if you write about it, then that must be who you are. It's more of, if you're writing about it and you're like really showing favoritism towards it, that's what I think really would expose an author, is really what they highlight as, they prop up as good and virtuous, right? That's usually what kind of exposes the author's true ideas, is when they prop up these things as good and virtuous in the overall narration. So
that the sooner books can be realistic again and not some morally perfect blandness.
That's one thing too. I have read a lot of books where they are trying to be morally perfect. And it's like, you know what? I wrote a character who is a monk who has been in the temple for 20 years since he was born, basically. And he is leaving the temple on his 20th birthday, and now he's going into the world. He is very morally pure, right? According to the standards of the temple, right? And that is kind of a part of the conflict, is where he's like, oh my gosh, people are doing crazy stuff out here, and this is wild. But that character still has flaws. He still makes mistakes, not just like the mistakes of like, oh, I missed the target in the archery contest. I'm not perfect. Oh, woe is me, right? That's usually where people make mistakes in these books, is like, oh, they failed to hit the target at 9,000 yards. They're not perfect. Everyone's flawed. Okay, no, people are flawed in their ways of thought. People are flawed in their viewpoint on others, right? People make mistakes all the time. So even though I do have this character who is very morally outstanding, it's very important, because when I wrote that, I was like, it's very important that I make sure that he still has issues that are not just, can he physically succeed at things? He can't just be morally superior to everyone at all times. There has to be some times where he's in the wrong, basically.
I'm sorry, but if you're writing a racist piece of shit for a character, then show them as they realistically would be. I never read a book thinking, oh, there's a racist character, the author's racist.
The author's racist.
Or there's a homophobic character, the author is now homophobic. I have never read a fucking book like that, and if you're one of those readers, thank you for being part of the problem. This is why characters are being watered down to nothing. Because people want to play this whole PC bullshit
and
game.
Always being okay with everything. That's another thing too, is like, a lot of times things that I read a lot of times where these characters live a certain way and they don't mind if someone else lives a different way. I read this novel. Most of the novel was great. Okay, I'll say that first off. Most of the novel was great, but they had this problem where this other kingdom that they were allies with, or at least on like good terms. I'm not sure if they were like hard allies. That wasn't 100% made clear, but they were at least allied enough to where he allowed them to come over. The king allowed them to come, send whoever they wanted to over to like potentially marry his daughter. That was part of the plot, was they were trying to marry the princess off. And this other kingdom was basically like misogyny incarnate. They would have their women wearing things that were uncomfortable. And so every time that the princess went on a date with one of these other kingdoms, princes or dukes or whoever they were, whenever she went on a date, in order to impress them more, her father made her wear clothing that was typical in their kingdom, right? Even though she was going to inherit, she was his heir, right? So even though they'd be coming to here to live, he was making them wear stuff that is appropriate over there. Okay, whatever. But these people, this kingdom, had people who were wearing things that literally hurt the woman. Like, I kind of imagine, like, the way that she described one of the pieces was like this thing that had shoulder pads that had spikes, so if she moved her head too much, she'd get poked. And then like chains that like weigh her down. But if she like doesn't keep up her posture, then like other things stick, and it was a very uncomfortable thing, and it was just very oppressive, right? It was wild. And then even when they went on their little date, he's like, "How do you like it?" And she's like, "Oh, it's something." And he goes, "Good, because it's meant to remind you that it's fucking oppressive." Okay. Meant to remind you of your place in the world, which is beneath us, and to be oppressed. And it's like, oh my God. That is not one of those things where you let bygones be bygones, right? Like, if a country is doing that to their people, you don't just go, yeah, you know what? That's okay. You do you. And also, you can even marry my daughter. No, you didn't do that back in those days. Not when, like, even nowadays, we have, like, there are places that, like, you know, I'm in the U.S. The U.S. has, like, sanctioned embargoes against other countries because they mistreat their people, right? And for other reasons as well. But that's one of those things where it's like, also given that he had a lot of other allies too, it's like, it wasn't like this was his only choice, right? This wasn't like, oh, they're a neighboring country that's way more militarized than we are, so if we're not friendly with them, they could just invade us and take over. Wasn't that. It wasn't like, oh, we don't have any other friends, everyone else is against the two of us, so we better team up so that way we can defend ourselves. Nope, wasn't that either. It was just another kingdom, another date, and it was like, it blew my mind wide open. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I hate it. You got to really tone that. I told the person, like, you got to really tone this down, because this just doesn't make any. This is breaking your world, right? This is breaking immersion now. I don't feel like I'm in a real thing. I feel like I'm in a feminist lecture, because this really just feels more like, you know, misogyny is bad. We know that. We all know that. But hey, you know what? Maybe your reader doesn't. Maybe a reader picks this up and they don't know misogyny is bad. And if that's the case, then, you know, let them know, I guess, right? Yeah, massaging a knee. Yeah, just gotta rub that. Just gotta rub that injury out. It's just one of those things where I don't think that they made much sense. I don't think that they thought it all the way through. They just thought that, hey, you know what? I'm going to put in like this really bad kingdom, and it'll really suck, and it'll be just a bad thing to put my character through. Was it a bad thing to put her character through? Absolutely. But did it make sense as to why her father would not only be friends with them, be allies with that kingdom, that nation, and then also invite them over to potentially marry her? No. Made no sense. Made zero sense. And that's one of those things where people want to have like the moral high ground, basically, right? It was just one of those things where it made it easy for our love protagonist to come in and save the day by punching the guy in the face and, you know, whatever. So it didn't work. And that is one of the things I hate most when I see in writing, is when they want to have the moral high ground at all times. Everyone messes up. Everyone is wrong somewhere. And it's important to really humanize your characters, that you do go to those places where your character can be wrong sometimes.
Of you're not allowed to write that. It offends me. But if you were to write a racist character, they will be saying racist and hurtful shit. And to think anything else is just straight up fucking stupid. And I mean that with all the disrespect. But back to the clip. No, Jenna, you're a load of bullshit right now for saying this. Are you seriously telling me that depicting a character...
I love when she goes like, all right, guys, back to the clip. No further clip. Motherfucker.
Character for what they fucking are is the author getting upset at the PC police saying they can't do that because to them that's the author being a bigot. It's people like you and people who believe like you do that is ruining writing believable characters in plots. You guys live in these perfectly PC flat...
Yeah, if I get any kind of like backlash on my book about like, you know, I think that you must be a racist, or I think that you must be a sexist because this other character was racist and sexist, then that kind of argument just doesn't make any sense, since obviously they're just characters in a book, and I'm trying to make the world more real. Correct. Dwarves are racist to elves. They hate them. All the dwarves hate all the elves. I kept that alive in my book. The dwarves do not like the Benarathian high elves. They don't like them at all. They've never met the wood elves because they live on a different continent, but they are not friendly whatsoever with the high elves.
Flowery bullshit fake worlds of everyone is morally great and fun and amazing.
Having bad characters
that's
is
not
good
real life.
for the
if you're
ability to show
basing a
growth.
story
like, bad people can
in
turn
our
around.
real world, you better depict it realistically, or it's not going to come off all that great. Books are reading so sterile now because every character needs to be morally correct, PC to a fault, and perfectly in line with what society believes what's right today.
So, God, I've read this before. There's a pretty well-known book out, at least in the book talk culture. It's called Iron Widow, I believe, Iron Widow, that does this. But I didn't read that book, but I have read others that do the same thing, where it's like it's a fight for feminism, right? But the world is so like deeply oppressive to women that there's no way the character would know to be feminist, right? Like they're like a third wave feminist, but they haven't, there was no first or second wave, right? So it's like, how are they this like moral paragon of virtue, and like they understand like women shouldn't be beaten every single day, when their mom is like, no, you deserved it. You deserved it. You know, like their grandma, their mom, their aunt, their sisters, their best friends' parents. Everyone is like, no, you were back talking him. You definitely deserved to get slapped. How are they the only one? There's no other people like grumbling about it. It's just them going, this isn't right. This isn't right. I have to stand up and fight for the rights of all women. Doesn't make any sense. Does not make any sense. And those books that do that kind of shit are ridiculous.
That writers forget to give characters personality and flaws and opinions that may not be correct, but for that character would be correct. They forget to craft believable characters and not some bullshit PC hot mess where no one is morally gray at all. That's how we get characters who are either 100% good and they fight the good fight and they're moral about everything, or the mustache twirling villains who are just basically evil and they hate everything the moral police likes. And stop gaslighting people into thinking that their quote-unquote art told on them. Just because you write non-PC things into your story doesn't mean the author thinks like that character. There should be a disconnect between the author and their characters. Because in a book, your characters are supposed to be realistic and believable beings. Authors are not their characters. That's like saying, okay, well, I just read Lolita. So that means the author of Lolita must have been a fucking pedophile, because Humbert was all about a 12-year-old, was it? No, he wrote a fucking book. He is not his characters. That's like me saying, okay, after DNFing the fuck out of the Savior's sister, you're Layla, you're a complete fucking psychopath. No, you are not your fucking characters. Your characters need personalities and behaviors that actually fit them. Like I said, there needs to be a disconnect between the authors and their characters. And turning it around on the author to claim the author is their character is complete and utter bullshit in my book. Yeah. And let's bring it back to TSC and Kaleo. Kaleo is the bisexual rapist or the almost rapist. So does that mean Jenna now hates bisexuals and sees them as bad and problematic rapists? I know that is an extreme example, but using Jenna's logic here, This is beyond
To take it
flawed.
to that-
Jenna
to
is
take it to
not
that
her
logic.
characters. But if we're using her logic, okay, then you just said to the world that you don't like bisexual people. Or how about in Eve the Awakening, where Jenna made up her own racial slurs for chimeras? If I remember right, they were called chimes or chemes. Correct me if I'm wrong, it's been years since I've read it. So doesn't that mean that Jenna's a bigot now? Because when I read that book, it really did feel like the civil rights movement, where people were picketing with signs with racial slurs and throwing all the hate. It literally mimicked the civil rights movement, but with chimeras. So does that make her a bigot now? Because she wrote all those characters in there being hateful pieces of shit.
True.
I mean, she made up whole slurs in her book and made it feel like she stole from the civil rights movement with the amount of picketing and hate towards Eve
the civil rights movement?
in the
I don't think
entire
you really
fucking
steal
book.
From the civil rights movement. It just
Like I said, does
was.
that mean
That's the thing.
Jenna should be judged just as harshly for daring to write that into her books? No. Because as a reader, I can differentiate the fact that Jenna is not her fucking characters. She's telling a story. Her job is to make believable characters. The PC police is censoring and canceling anything and everything they do not like. Authors are told to, quote-unquote, stay in their lane and don't write this or that or the other thing. And if you voice your opinion against them, you are automatically labeled a bigot or some kind of ist or phobe. When in reality, the only people who are truly phobic here are the ones who try to shut down and silence anyone whose opinion is different from their own. That, to me, is showing true phobic behavior, because they can't stand the thought of someone disagreeing with them or having another opinion that challenges their own. They fear that. So what do? They throw out labels like racist, bigot, homophobic, transphobic, whatever phobic you want to put in there. They will do that because they know once they label you, you'll shut the fuck up, and they won. So tell me again how they're not the ones who are afraid of any other opinion but their own. But you know what I want? I want characters to fucking matter again. I want them to feel realistic and not fucking perfect and bland and boring. I want characters to have fun, exciting personalities. I want villains to be something other than the white, straight Christian male or female. And this is coming from someone who isn't religious whatsoever. Just make characters matter again. But it's to the point in books being published today that the villains will more than likely never be anything but white, straight Christian males or females. Ages can vary. Or at least that's the case in Alexa Dunn's books, since no one but white people are capable of evil to her. Well, white, straight people. And if you don't believe me, go read all 4 of her fucking books.
No, thank
Every
you.
single villain in her books are white, straight, and male, or white, straight, and female. The only thing that's different is ages. Oh, and they typically tend to be the love interest, or at least in Pretty Dead Queens.
Got him.
But my point is this. Sadly, most books published today will continue to be predictable, boring, stale, and unrealistic until this shit changes. And authors are just allowed to breathe again and not feel like they're walking on eggshells, afraid of being canceled if they have a character society doesn't like, and then they're deemed, oh, you wrote that character, that means you must hate this whole entire community. That's not the case, people. Readers just need to look at their characters as realistic people who are terribly flawed. Because if you look at our world, everyone is flawed in some way. And everyone is capable of evil, no matter what their race, gender, religion, and or their sexual orientation is. Evil comes in all shades, and it isn't racist to say that or put that in your book. But enough ranting here. This section's probably like 40 minutes long.
Super long, yep.
But I get heated on this subject because everyone plays it too safe now, and it's ruining characters.
Yeah.
And what's the
It's
point
true.
of books?
You're reading the
To
same
have
character
characters
over
in
and over
them.
again, all
So
the
if you're
books,
ruining
they're just the
characters, you're
same
ruining
moral
potentially good stories.
paragon.
But like I said, enough ranting. Let's move to the next clip.
Number 8. I believe in engaging with my reviewers. In other words, I believe in harassing everyone who gives me less than 5 stars. It's a well-known industry expectation. Writers stay out of reviewer spaces. If you want to read your reviews, that's on you. And if you want to thank someone for a positive review, that's fine. But you do not respond to, engage with, or defend yourself against negative reviews. That's creepy. Writers like this claim they're not offended. They're just trying to learn and grow. But we all know that's horseshit. You can learn and grow without badgering strangers online. Plus, we've seen your engagement. You're just throwing a tantrum. Top-notch maturity. Even if you want to defend this engagement, the fact is, reviewers don't like it. It makes them uncomfortable, and they will not hesitate to blacklist you for being a creeper. Engage if you want to, but be prepared to sacrifice your reputation as a result.
Okay, now I can get back to agreeing with Jenna here. The best rule of thumb is to not engage with your reviewers. Nothing good will become of that. Trust me, look at everything on Twitter. Even if you have all the best intentions and are nice and polite to your reviewers, people will twist your words and your, motivation behind approaching your reviewer and use it against you, as they did with Daniel Green on Goodreads. He was nice when commenting back to a reviewer, and people lost their shit about it. They acted like he was that one woman who attacked a reviewer who gave her 4 stars instead of 5. I can't remember her name now, but she wrote a memoir. But she went on this epic rant on Twitter about someone giving her a 4-star review and how disrespectful that was. And then she got her 15 minutes of shame fame and blamed it on being high on pot or, the devil's lettuce. I personally don't see a problem with being nice to your reviewers and thanking them for taking the time out of their day to, read the book and review the book. Or, starting a conversation with them. I don't understand how people can freak out.
So, when it comes to reviewers, I would say for any authors out there, just stay out of that. I would suggest not even reading the reviews, okay? If someone, because nowadays you have so many ways to be reached, right? If they really want to reach out to you and be like, look, this book was so good, it changed my life, they'll do that. They will be able to reach you, okay? You've got your email out there, you got your TikToks, your Twitters, you got ways of being reached. That's not in the review section of your book, okay? You don't need to go there. You do not need to be there. I think that it's not good to go through to find the good reviews because, number one, if you go for the good reviews and don't read the bad, then you're just going to be giving yourself a false sense of inflated ego. And on top of that, if you respond to those, but you don't respond to the negative criticism, in my opinion, that shows basically a cowardice almost. You were willing to, you're willing to reach out to people who were nice to you, but you're not willing to reach out to people who were critical of you. Stay, even in that mindset, it's like you still wouldn't reach out to the people who were mean about it. But the people who were nice but critical, you're not going to reach out to them. You're just going to reach out to the ones who were nice and gave you a 5-star or a 4-star or something like that. You're gonna say oh, thanks for your review. I'm glad you liked it. But people who didn't like it and say hey, you know what? I don't think the plot was there. You're not gonna reach out to them and be like, hey, I appreciate your time. I'm sorry you didn't like it, right? You're not gonna engage with that. But you are gonna engage with the others. Just don't do it. Just stay out of it. Because if you do decide to go in and you do the honorable thing and you read all of it, because again, if you read only the good stuff, you respond to only the good stuff, you're dodging the bad stuff. You're going to be giving yourself a false sense of entitlement, a false sense of basically confidence on your review. Oh, everyone loved it. No, not everyone, just everyone that you read, right? So if you go in there and you're going to read everyone, then you're going to start reading the ones that are also very mean, right? You're going to see the ones that are not just like, oh, it didn't work out for me. I think I can see what other people would like it, that kind of stuff. You're also going to read the ones that are like, this guy sucks. He has no reason in being here. He should go hang himself. You're going to read those. So don't do that to yourself. Just stay out of those comments. There are other ways that you can be reached, that if someone really liked your work, they will find you in your other social medias, and they will reach out to you there, right? And then you can have that conversation of, I'm so glad that you liked it, whatever the conversation is, right? The time that you should be having those conversations with negative critiques is with your critique partners. Your critique partners, that's what they're there for. Okay? You should be having conversations with those critique partners, not the random person who feels like they're a book critique that actually matters, right? I feel like with Goodreads, we've given people way too much power over being able to like say what they want to say about a book. It's like, yes, you can say what you want to say about this book, but just the same way that when I take critique partners' feedback and I take beta read feedback, it's not all equal. It's not all equal. Sometimes people have bad takes. Sometimes people, aren't as good as the next person or the person that came before them. Okay? Not everyone's opinion on a matter is equal. My opinion on writing is very good. My opinion on nuclear fusion is not so great, right? I don't know enough about that. I don't know enough to really give a whole lot of insight on nuclear fusion, right? And again, you don't need to be an expert, right? You don't need to be an expert on the subject matter to the degree of giving your opinion. Giving your opinion on things is one thing, but being able to like actually critique is something different. So when people go onto Goodreads and they leave their book review, that comes across as like it has more weight than it really should, is what I'm saying. And I kind of wish that they would, I don't know if they do this or not, but I kind of wish that they would be like, here's the score it got from legitimate critique, from like legitimate book reviewers. Like these people are all like, this is all they do. This is what they do for their living, for their livelihood. They critique books. And then here's what the general population gave it, right? I think those should be separate in the sense of like, hey, critique people, they gave it really high scores. General public gave it very low scores, or vice versa, or both gave it very high, both gave it very low. I think that would make a lot better, because basically Bookreads is, it's like Twitter for books in a sense, right? It's a social media platform. It's not really where you should be graded, right? Imagine you're in college and someone who's not, your math professor grades your homework and they don't know the answers. They don't really know, right? But then they grade you, and that is your grade. That's your grade. Right? They gave you a 3-star, right? They gave you a 1-star, but they have no clue what they're talking about, right? The plot got too confusing, so I DNF'd 1 star. Does that mean that the person wrote it poorly? Maybe. Could it also potentially mean that the person's not good at following along with a plot and they got confused and then quit? Yeah, maybe. Right? That's my take on like the Goodreads and leaving messages. I think that it needs an overhaul to that system, because I think that we're seeing people bubbling up with these frustrations. Like she mentioned that author that basically her argument was like, look, if you liked it so much, why not just give it a 5-star? Because my score will always go down, right? As people continuously give me scores like 4 stars, my score actually keeps going down further from a 5-star, right? I'll never get back up to 5-star once the first non-5-star hits, right? I'm always perpetually going down. So if you really loved it, why not just give it a 5-star to help me not go down anymore? That's what she was really asking for, was like, why not? I don't know how. I think I read it back when it happened, and it was kind of like a nasty take on this. So she didn't. So basically, people attacked her for the way she was saying it, and the conversation got moved away from what she was saying. Exactly, flip the table. That's what people focused on, was that she was being mean about it. But the reality was, her argument was kind of fair. If you like it so much, why not just give it a 5-star? Why are you holding out your 5-star? It's not like it costs you anything to give me a 5-star. It's not, you don't. And it kind of goes back to being like, you're not a critic, right? You're not an actual critic who, like, your 5 stars mean something, right? Your 5 stars don't mean anything other than publicity and marketability for my book, right? That's all it really means in an aggregate. What were those guys' names that was so big? Like Robert and Ebert or something like that. Those guys could make or break a movie, right? If they were like, this movie was garbage, we give it 1 star. This movie was great, we give it 5 stars. That was like, people really went off that shit, right? People really believed in their ability to rate movies. And that's kind of like, where we kind of hold this 5-star idea, is like, oh, we can't give something 5 stars unless it actually is perfect, right? But that's not true. 5 stars go to imperfect things. It's just, was it super good? Was it superior to a lot of other things? The answer is yes. Then maybe it deserves a 5-star. We should really consider that, right? There's a well, I'm kind of forgetting his name now, but there's a wrestling reviewer guy who gives 5.5 stars, who will give a 6-star. It will give like a match a 6-star review sometimes because it was so good, right? It was better than 5 stars. It was a 6-star, right? That, you can't do that in this little confines of the thing. The guy, Dave, I think his name is Dave or something like that. Dave is able to, he has his own ranking system. He's able to say this was a 6-star match, right? But when you go on to Goodreads give you 5 stars. That's all you got to work with. They don't charge you for it. They don't charge you for your 5 stars. So you can easily put in 5 stars if you really liked it. So why not? If you really liked it, if you really found nothing wrong with it, why not give it 5 stars? Right? And I would even argue for myself, the way that I review books is that if I liked it so much, even if there are flaws with it, but I really, really enjoyed reading it, I could still put it as a 5-star. Right? There's nothing wrong with giving things 5 stars. Yes, you might not want to do it all the time, right? But, people do these review bombs where they do 1 stars, they do 5 stars, they just to help the book out because they know that's marketable, right? So if you know that, if you're going to grade a book and you're like, I loved everything about it, it was perfect, it was super, super good, 4 stars. Why are you doing that? Why would you do that? You basically hurt her when you could have given her a 5-star that she needed. You gave her a 4-star. That kind of hurt her, And people are like, you're ungrateful for that review, for it being, it was a positive review. 4 stars is good. And, again, it comes down to the fact that she'll never get back up to 5 stars. So that's what I'm saying about this whole system that we have in place now. It needs an overhaul because people are too, people who are too stingy with their 5 stars, or they're throwing them left, right, and center because they don't care. They're just like, I just love this person on Tinder. I just love this person on Tinder. I love this person on TikTok. I love this person on Facebook. I love their videos on whatever, on Twitter. and YouTube and all that kind of stuff. I just love the person, so I'm just gonna go ahead and just hit it with a 5-star, even though I haven't read the book yet. What? You know, what? Or vice versa, hitting it with a 1. It's just one of those things where we really need, I think, maybe they do this. I don't know. I haven't been over there in a long time, but they should really do this thing where, you know, have people who are considered professional critiques or, you know, professional critics. Their scores are off to the side where it's like critics are giving it a, you know, 4.5 out of 5, while Random Joe Blows are giving it a 3.5 out of 5. You know, do that so that way we have a bit more of an idea as to where it should be. And that way all the review bombing is going to happen over on the Random Joe Blow side. And that way it can't really damage the true critique people, you know. We just need to overhaul that system.
Over this. I review books all the time on this channel, and if an author ever reached out to me to have a polite, civil conversation, I actually would not mind at all. Like, at all. Now, if they attacked me, that would be a whole other story. But would I personally reach out to people who review my books in the future? Hell to the fuck no, I would not. I am not opening myself to that unnecessary drama that would come with all of it. But if my readers ever wanted to talk to me about my book, hell yeah, I'd talk to them.
One thing I would say about this, the idea of like reaching out to someone, you know, behind the scenes, right? You email them, you're not blasting them on Twitter or something like that, right? You reach out to them in private and you want their opinion more. I would say probably don't, but I would say if you really find that person to be like super, like really good information, like really good feedback that you got from their critique of your book, maybe ask like, hey, I'm writing another book. Do you think, would you like to read it as an ARC review or like to read it as, you know, like a beta reader? Like, could I get your opinion on this other book? I think that's okay, because at that point, you're not talking about their critique that they already gave you. You're just asking for future help, right? I think that's okay.
To them, there's nothing wrong with that, but I would never approach anyone first. The way people twist words and meanings now, none of this interaction is worth any of it. Which kind of sucks, because I think it would be nice to interact with readers. Hell, even the ones that didn't like my work, I wouldn't mind talking to if they wanted to talk. But sadly, once again, society comes in to ruin any and all reader/writer relationships
they can reach you
and
on
deems
your
it
other
grossly
platforms.
inappropriate on all fronts. But I do agree with Jenna when she did say you can thank people, though. That's like the least you can do. But even that can be seen as bad to some people who just want to look for the negative in everything you do.
I would say thanking people like on your other platform, you know, like don't go into the comment section on your reviews. On your, whatever your main platform is, you can say, hey guys, I really appreciate all the feedback I'm getting. I really appreciate you guys leaving those reviews. I'm glad that some of you like the book. I really appreciate you voicing your opinions on there. It really helps. Thank you. That's totally fine. But again, I don't think that I don't think it's a good look if you're only thanking the people who gave you positive reviews.
And it opens you up to a bunch of unnecessary drama that you are not going to want to be a part in. So I'd say just don't even fucking do anything. Read your reviews and stay silent. As for reading your reviews, I'd say do it. You can learn so much from your negative reviews. Sure, you aren't able to apply that feedback to that current published story, but you are able to make sure it doesn't happen again with your next book. And if you aren't mentally strong enough to read your own reviews for whatever fucking reason, have someone read it for you and give you a summarized statement on this is what's commonly said. And you can still use that feedback to make sure it doesn't happen again in your next book. But moving on to the next clip.
Number 9. What should I write about? In other words, do my job for me. I wish this wasn't such a common question, but at least once a week, someone asks me, what should I write about? Bitch, I don't know. It's your book. Why the fuck are you asking me?
Yeah.
The thing about writing is it's a grueling, time-consuming task with no guarantee of financial gain. That means if you decide to write a book, you better damn well be passionate about that plotline. So if this is your passion, why are you asking strangers to choose the plot for you? Better yet, why are you unloading the entire creative process onto someone else? That's the best part. It leads me to believe you're not actually excited about the writing process. You just want to be a writer for other arbitrary reasons, like prestige. And if you can't come up with your own plot, I don't know how you expect to write an entire book, because this shit is fucking hard.
I mean, this point isn't all that hard to agree with. Writing is hard, like Jenna said. But you know what? Sometimes talking it out with someone, a fellow writer or reader, can really help the creative juices start flowing again, so to speak. I mean, a simple question like, okay, well, what kind of plots do you like? That can lead to the person thinking, well, I love swoon-worthy romance novels, like the kind with the buff dude on the cover with the long hair. That right there can set a generic plot for a romance novel. I personally love talking to authors about their stories and my stories and bounce ideas off of each other. Not only is it fun, but I've also had some of my best plotting done while doing this. So on one hand, Jenna saying people come to her and ask, what do I write about? Is a big open-ended question that can lead to a long, time-consuming conversation that you may not have the time for. But on the other hand, a simple, well, what do you like to read? I'd suggest starting there. Look at your favorite books. What do you like about them? What genre do they fall in? What do you like and dislike about them? What are your favorite tropes in that book? All of this could be said in a quick 10-minute chat and at least help guide them into the right direction. Hopefully. If it doesn't, then I have no fucking clue what to do. But then again, in Jenna's defense, she probably has a shit ton of people asking her this, so it would get old after a while, and like I said, it's time consuming, and you have your own shit to do and worry.
Yeah, massively time consuming. I see this kind of stuff on Reddit quite often where they're like, I need help with my magic system, or how do you think this would work? I saw one that was like, how do I close a sky portal? What? Like, I hear these things, it's mind-boggling. Why are you asking me to basically come up with your plot? Why are you asking me to come up with your plot? That doesn't make any sense. You are a writer. You can do this. You got it. Just think it out.
About.
Just keep
so
going.
It could get old after a while, I guess. But let's move on to the last clip.
And number 10, I don't need an editor, I'm really good at proofreading. In other words, I have no idea what an editor actually does. Proofreading means checking for small errors like typos or missing words. Editors edit. They check for inconsistencies in your story. They assess the character arcs. They highlight filler and fluff. They address your world, your plot and subplots, your pacing and tension.
They
fix your grammar and
though.
punctuation. They address your sentence structure and tone. And that's not even half of it. Did you think about any of this shit while you were proofreading? Didn't think so. I understand editors are expensive, but that's because they are providing a service. It's almost like it's their job. And when you do your job, typically you're supposed to get paid. Look, I don't care if you are the best proofreader in the world. If your book isn't edited, it's not done. Congratulations, you've released a draft to the masses. That probably wasn't a smart move.
As a professional freelance editor, I agree with Jenna here. For the love of all things writerly, please hire an editor. If you can't afford one, then start saving while you start writing your book. If you still can't afford an editor, then turn to a trusted friend or family member who's good with English and pray for the best. I mean, if you're broke and don't have the thousands of dollars that it costs to hire an editor, then you don't have the funds to do it, and it is what it is, and it fucking sucks. I've been there. But this is where self-editing, like a professional editor, comes into play. I'm going to be doing a full series on how to self-edit so you can have a very clean and tidy draft at the end of it. This is what I do for my personal writing projects. So I'm going to, have a full 12-step self-editing process for you guys. But I will say this.
That's very nice of you.
My process is very time consuming.
Of
But
course it is.
it works for me. And like I said, I'm left with a very clean and tidy rough draft at the end of it.
Rough? Has it rough
And
before?
if you don't have the money for an editor, that's the kind of draft you want. So be on the lookout for that series. So
when it comes to like self-editing, not having the money to pay for multiple editors, that you're not paying for one editor. A lot of times an editor is going to just do the copy edit. They're just going to do the line edits. They're just going to do the developmental edit. They're not going to do all of it. They might do some of them together, but the chances that they're going to do all of them is very low. And if they are going to do all of them, that might actually kind of be a bit of a red flag, because they're splitting things. First off, if they're a developmental editor and they're also going to do copy editing, a developmental edit might mean that you need to kind of go back to the drawing board on some things. Like you might have to kind of rewrite some of your stuff. So you really need to do a developmental edit separately. And then once you've gone through your developmental edit, then you can go back and have them do like copy and line edit. Because otherwise, again, like they finish your entire book and they charge you for it. Then you go back and you start doing your developmental edits, and guess what? Things are going to get cut, things are going to get added, and you need those things all, looked at and done. So it's one of those things where, you don't want to do that. When it comes to self-editing, maybe I'll go more into this whenever she does hers, and I'll do a reaction of her videos on that as well. But I'll just say for myself right here is that when I do my self edits, a lot of times I'm doing that while I'm writing the story. I read or I heard, I can't remember which one, but basically I think I read that Tolkien would basically, whenever he would sit down to write like another chapter, he would go through his entire manuscript that he's written so far, doing edits to it, and then he would write like the next chapter kind of thing. So I don't do that, but I do sometimes read like a chapter or two to kind of get myself back in the mindset of like, okay, where was I kind of going with the story? Okay, yeah, this is kind of what the flow was. This is what we're doing. Let me actually fix that real fast. Okay, let me reword that. So I do that sometimes. But after I've gotten like my critique partners have read the whole story, and now it's time to go into like the heavier editing. At that point, because I am a developmental editor, I do check. This kind of feels like it doesn't take much brain processing power, but like you just basically look at your characters and you say, where were they in the beginning? Okay, where were they at the end? Okay, great. They completed the arc. They definitely completed it. Let's go back and take a look at where the arc is like really being shown, and make sure that it is being shown. Make sure that it is clear that the arc is occurring right now, right? And that's the same thing then goes for the plot. Same thing goes for like, okay, did I like what was it clear as far as the world building of that nature, right? And that's also taking into account like the critique partners, maybe beta readers who have read for you, what they've said, like, I'm not really sure how this magic is working, or like, I'm not, this kind of confused me here, like that kind of stuff. You take that into effect there and say, okay, most people thought this was not clear enough here. Let's fix that, right? At that point, once you've gone through that, you start going into like your real like grammatical edits and things of that nature. That's when you want to definitely take your break from the project. And that's usually like a month at least, but probably maybe like 2 or 3 months, where you can not looked at it, and then say to yourself, you go back to it, and as you're reading it, now these words are like new to you again, right? They're not so fresh in your mind as they were before, where you start catching little things like, oh, I missed a the. There should be a the here. There should be an a here. There should be a comma here. A lot of times when you've just written it, your mind fills in those gaps that it knows it should be there. So it just fills it in for you, right? And like she says, it's time consuming to do all this kind of stuff because you really have to slow down. I even sometimes will read, like if it's a paragraph of 4 sentences, I will read the sentences like the last one first. I don't read them backwards. I read the sentences, the last one first, then the third one, then the second, and the first. That way I'm not getting context in my brain, right? I'm just literally reading the sentence only, and then, okay, this needs a comma, this needs to be capitalized, this needs to be periods, that kind of stuff. I'll even do that kind of thing to make sure I'll read an entire page going up. That way I am not going to get kind of like drawn in to the just reading line by line by line. Yeah, all looks good, right? That will happen very easily. So I do kind of look forward to seeing what she has to say about how she edits her books. But I'm not surprised that she says that it's time consuming.
Below and tell me what you think of Jenna's advice here.